A white cop harassed a black woman outside court. She made one call, and the FBI showed up. Velma Hayes never expected her day in court to go like this. Faced with intimidation on the steps of the historic Fulton County Courthouse, threatened by officers who wore their prejudice like a badge, and forced to relive painful memories of injustice. But sometimes heroes are forged from the unlikeliest of circumstances. In a single, life-changing phone call, Velma Hayes turned the tables on those who sought to silence her. Soon an entire system trembled at the approach of the FBI. If you think you know how this ends, prepare to be surprised, because in this story, justice has a brand new face. Velma Hayes breathed deeply as she stood on the steps of the Fulton County Courthouse in downtown Atlanta. The building loomed high in the southern sunshine, its arches and ionic columns a testament to the city's long and complicated history. She could almost feel the ghosts of past injustices swirling around the corridors inside. After all, this was the same courthouse that had once seen far too many unfair rulings for people who looked like her. Despite the nerves dancing in her stomach, Velma wore her best suit, a crisp navy blue jacket paired with matching slacks. She had chosen a white blouse and simple low heels to project confidence. At 36 years old, Velma had weathered many storms. A single mother, an accomplished social worker, and a woman of unyielding faith and justice. She was no stranger to conflict, but today felt different. Today she was here to support her nephew, Jeremiah Hayes, who had been wrongfully arrested after a protest against police brutality turned chaotic. Jeremiah was only 19, a smart college freshman with a penchant for creative writing. He had been out on the streets with friends, marching peacefully, holding a placard that read, "Equality for All." When the protest was infiltrated by agitators who smashed store windows, the police had shown no mercy. They arrested a dozen young black men on the spot, Jeremiah among them, charging them with destruction of property and resisting arrest, despite video evidence proving Jeremiah was nowhere near the looting. Velma clenched her jaw as she recalled the phone call late that night. Jeremiah crying, frightened, and behind bars. She had promised him she would do everything in her power to see him free. That promise had brought her here, to this imposing courthouse, hoping that the truth would finally prevail. The sun beat down on her forehead as she glanced at her watch. The hearing was scheduled to begin in 45 minutes, and she needed to meet Jeremiah's lawyer inside soon. Just as she gathered her nerves to ascend the courthouse steps, her phone buzzed in her handbag. "Miss Hayes," came a familiar voice. "Andrea, an assistant at the nonprofit Velma volunteered for. Just wanted to confirm your lunch meeting tomorrow about the youth mentorship program." Velma sighed in relief at the mundane question. Normal life, normal worries, something she sorely needed in this moment. "Yes, absolutely, tomorrow at noon. Thanks, Andrea." She ended the call and looked up once more at the courthouse's pillars. Drawing a deep breath, she vowed that justice would be served today. Little did she know, a much darker presence waited for her on these steps, and her faith in the system would be tested in ways she could never have foreseen. As she climbed the final steps to the courthouse's wide entrance, Velma's progress was halted by two uniformed police officers stationed near the doors. One was tall and thin with a wiry mustache that twitched as he eyed her. The other was broad-shouldered, his face set in a permanent scowl. The tall officer took a step forward. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to see some identification," he said, his voice colder than the marble walls surrounding them. Velma blinked in surprise. "Certainly," she replied, sliding her driver's license from her purse and handing it over. He scrutinized it for what felt like an uncomfortably long time. "What business do you have here today?" She noticed his name tag, Officer Ben Turner. The broad-shouldered man, Officer Chris Daniels, stood slightly behind Turner, wearing a smug expression. Velma's instinct screamed that something was off. Usually, courthouse security checks involved metal detectors and scanning bags, not a prolonged ID interrogation outside the building. "I'm here for my nephew's hearing," Velma answered evenly. "He was arrested a few days ago." Officer Daniels let out a short, nasty laugh. "One of those protesters, right?" Velma kept her face neutral even as her heart pounded faster. "He was protesting, yes, but he wasn't involved in any vandalism," she said. Turner handed her license back with a sneer. "Go on in," he said quietly, but even as he said the words, he blocked her path. Velma looked from Turner to Daniels, her eyes flicking between them in confusion. "Is there a problem?" "There might be," Turner replied, a thin smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. He lowered his voice. We've had a little too much trouble from people around here lately. Just making sure you're not looking to start anymore." The statement was vague enough to be deniable if she confronted him, but dripping with implication. Velma felt a cold wave of anger and fear wash over her. She'd heard about rogue officers harassing black citizens, especially outside court proceedings in high-profile cases. It wasn't supposed to happen in broad daylight, but apparently that didn't stop them. "I'd like to go inside now," she said calmly, refusing to be intimidated. Turner moved slightly to let her pass, but Daniels leaned in, almost whispering in her ear. "We'll be keeping an eye on you. You caused trouble, and we'll have you in cuffs before you know it." His breath, hot and rancid, brushed against her cheek. The threat was crystal clear. Velma's stomach churned with revulsion, but she refused to let them see her shaken. She stepped around them and entered the courthouse, her heart pounding against her rib cage. Inside, the grandeur of the lobby, polished floors, high ceilings, ornate chandeliers, contrasted sharply with the vile hostilities she had just experienced. She paused near the security checkpoint, trying to steady her breathing as uniformed deputies guided visitors through metal detectors. For a moment, she wondered if she should report what just happened. But then she remembered the countless stories of individuals who tried to file complaints only to find themselves stonewalled by the system. Should she let it go? Was it just a few bad apples abusing their power? As much as she wanted to believe that, she knew better. Racism in law enforcement wasn't an isolated incident. It was systemic. Still, there was a hearing to attend, and Jeremiah needed her. Next in line, a security officer called. Velma slipped out of her heels, placed them in a bin along with her handbag and phone, and walked through the metal detector. The device beeped. The officer waved her through again, and this time she passed without incident. Grabbing her belongings, she hurried toward the elevator banks, determined not to let the officers outside rattle her focus. But the memory of their sneering faces lingered. A small part of her wondered if what she'd just experienced was only the beginning. By the time Velma reached the courtroom on the 4th floor, her pulse had calmed slightly. She found Jeremiah and his lawyer, Lisa Mendez, seated on a wooden bench in the hallway. Jeremiah looked both relieved and sheepish when he saw her. "Aunt Velma," he murmured, standing to give her a hug. His tall, lanky frame seemed slightly stooped, weighed down by stress and fear. Lisa Mendez, a Hispanic attorney known for her dedication to civil rights, reached out a hand. "Miss Hayes, good to see you." Velma forced a smile. "Thank you for representing Jeremiah on such short notice, Miss Mendez. I'm so grateful for your help." Lisa nodded. "We have a strong case. There's video evidence showing Jeremiah wasn't part of the vandalism. I'm hoping the district attorney will drop the charges altogether." Jeremiah swallowed. "They told me it could take months to clear my name completely." Velma placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "We'll do whatever it takes," she said firmly. "The truth will come out." Before long, a bailiff stepped out and called for the hearing to begin. Velma squeezed Jeremiah's hand reassuringly, and they followed Lisa inside. The courtroom judge, Melissa Hoffman, a middle-aged woman with a stern expression, presided over the hearing. Lisa presented the video footage along with eyewitness statements. The prosecutor, a tough-looking man named Michael Dean, argued that the footage was inconclusive, but Lisa countered effectively, pointing out timestamps and referencing multiple angles. Velma watched anxiously as Judge Hoffman reviewed the materials. She could see the tension in Jeremiah's shoulders, the hope in his eyes every time Lisa scored a point. Velma prayed silently that the judge would see the obvious innocence of her nephew. After nearly an hour of back and forth, Judge Hoffman adjusted her glasses and cleared her throat. "Mr. Hayes, the evidence provided suggests you were not involved in the destruction of property. While the state may pursue further investigation, for now, I am ordering your release on your own recognizance pending any additional findings." Velma felt a rush of relief, so potent it nearly made her dizzy. Jeremiah squeezed her hand under the table, tears brimming in his eyes. The hearing ended, and Velma rose to her feet, thankful for a judge who at least appeared to be fair. Outside the courtroom, Lisa explained the next steps. "Technically, the charges aren't fully dropped yet, but this is a great outcome for now. Just be prepared for any follow-up hearings." Jeremiah exhaled shakily. "Thank you, Miss Mendez. Thank you so much." Velma placed her arm around his shoulders. "We'll get through it," she whispered, feeling as though she'd just stepped off a dangerous ledge. They walked together toward the elevators. Lisa parted ways, reminding them to stay in touch. Velma and Jeremiah descended to the lobby, each step a little lighter than before. As they approached the exit, Velma's relief was replaced by a creeping dread. Would those same officers be waiting outside? She couldn't forget their threatening glares, and she couldn't push away the thought that this wasn't over, not by a long shot. Sure enough, the moment Velma and Jeremiah emerged through the courthouse's front doors, they spotted officers Turner and Daniels. This time they weren't alone. A third officer, tall with a muscular build, stood next to them, arms crossed. Velma felt Jeremiah tense beside her. She had already shared what happened with him before the hearing, and the sight of the officers confirmed their suspicions that trouble was brewing. Jeremiah, still in his early adulthood, glanced nervously at his aunt. "Should we just keep walking?" he asked. Velma placed a calming hand on his shoulder. "Yes, let's not engage them unless we have to." They began to descend the steps, deliberately focusing on the sidewalk ahead, but they couldn't avoid the confrontation. As soon as they neared the sidewalk, Turner stepped in front of Velma, blocking her path again. Well, you're back," Turner said, feigning surprise. He tipped his hat back, revealing sharp, unforgiving eyes. Daniels took a step forward, addressing Jeremiah with a sneer. "Is this the young thug who got picked up for that riot last week?" Velma's pulse thundered in her ears. She had to keep calm for Jeremiah's sake. "He's not a thug," she said calmly, "and he was cleared by the judge." "Cleared? That's not how I see it," Daniels said, giving Jeremiah a pointed once-over. "Once a troublemaker, always a troublemaker." The third officer, whose name tag read Henderson, spoke up for the first time. "Why don't you two move along?" he said in a low, threatening tone. "Unless you're looking to cause more trouble around here." Jeremiah opened his mouth to protest, but Velma squeezed his arm in warning. They had no reason to linger and every reason to de-escalate the situation. "Officer," Velma said, her voice steady, "we're leaving." But as they tried to pass, Turner stepped in Velma's way once more, so close she could smell the bitter tang of coffee on his breath. "You think just because some liberal judge let him go, you're off the hook?" he asked, his voice dripping with malice. "We'll be watching both of you." Velma's mind raced. The tension was suffocating. She glanced around, noticing that a few bystanders had begun to watch from a distance, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and concern. "Don't you have somewhere else to be? Or someone else to harass?" she asked, surprising even herself with the sharpness in her tone. Turner's face twisted with anger, and for a moment, Velma thought he might reach for his weapon. Daniel's hand was already resting on the butt of his holstered gun. "We don't take orders from you," Daniel snapped. Velma felt Jeremiah trembling beside her. She had to end this. Summoning her courage, she locked eyes with Turner. "We're done talking." Then she stepped around him and started walking away, pulling Jeremiah along. They were nearly to the sidewalk when she heard Turner's voice calling out, loudly enough for bystanders to hear. "You people never learn, do you? Always thinking you're above the law." Something inside Velma snapped. She whirled around, fury and hurt mingling in her chest. She thought of the centuries of oppression, the daily microaggressions, the countless stories of black men and women who had lost their lives due to racial profiling and police brutality. She opened her mouth to retaliate, but Jeremiah gently touched her arm, pulling her back. She could see the fear in his eyes, fear for her safety. She understood in that moment that no matter how just her cause, a power-hungry cop with a racist streak could twist her words or actions into something that would hurt them both. So she didn't respond. Instead, she turned on her heel and walked away, her heart pounding, tears of rage threatening to escape her eyes. A million thoughts stormed through her mind, but one rose above the rest. This won't stand. By the time they reached Velma's car, Jeremiah's breath came in quick, ragged gasps, like he was on the verge of a panic attack. Velma guided him into the passenger seat and climbed behind the wheel, her own hands shaking as she gripped the steering wheel. A torrent of conflicting emotions surged through her. She was angry, no, furious, at the brazen racism she had just encountered. She was terrified for Jeremiah, who was still so young, his future hanging in the balance. She was weary of fighting a system that often felt impossible to change. But beneath the fear and exhaustion, a spark of determination began to glow. Velma was a social worker who had dedicated her life to helping underprivileged youth navigate a system stacked against them. She knew people who knew people, advocates, lawmakers, and even individuals in the Department of Justice. Her mind drifted to a memory, a distant cousin, Donovan Reed, who worked as a federal investigator for the FBI. She had met him only a few times at family reunions, but they got along well, sharing a passion for justice. Velma recalled how he had given her his card once, saying, "If you ever need anything, if it's serious, don't hesitate to reach out." Was this serious enough? Two racist cops harassing her and Jeremiah might not constitute a full-scale FBI operation, but these things seldom happened in isolation. Could it be part of a larger pattern of abuse in the precinct? Could Donovan help ensure that any complaint she filed would be taken seriously instead of being buried? Her hand trembled as she reached into her purse for her phone. Jeremiah turned to her, brow furrowed. "What are you doing?" Velma drew in a steadying breath. "I'm making a call." She scrolled through her contacts, found Donovan's number, and pressed the dial button. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. Donovan Reed speaking. Velma exhaled, suddenly aware of the weight of her decision. "Donovan, it's Velma Hayes, your cousin." A moment of recognition. "Velma. Hey, it's been a while. How are you?" She caught the worry in his tone, and the warmth in it too. "I'm okay, but something happened at the courthouse today. My nephew and I were harassed by some officers. It wasn't just the usual hassle. It felt targeted, hateful." Donovan's voice grew serious. "Tell me everything." Velma explained the situation, starting from the protest and Jeremiah's wrongful arrest, to the hearing, and finally to the ugly confrontation outside the courthouse. She left nothing out: the sneers, the racial slurs, the veiled threats. When she finished, Donovan was silent for a moment. "Velma, I'm sorry you both went through that. I can't promise immediate action, but the FBI does investigate matters of civil rights violations when there's evidence of a pattern or practice. This might be bigger than just two racist cops. If they've done this before, let me talk to some colleagues in the Civil Rights Division. We'll see what can be done." Velma closed her eyes, relieved that Donovan seemed to take this seriously. "Thank you," she whispered. I can't let it slide." "You did the right thing calling me," Donovan said. "I'll get back to you soon with some next steps. In the meantime, keep your head down. I don't want those officers retaliating." She swallowed hard. "I will." They ended the call, and Velma looked at Jeremiah. The younger man's face was grim, but a hint of relief flickered in his eyes. "The FBI?" he asked softly. Velma nodded. "Just a conversation for now. But if there's a wider pattern, they might investigate." Jeremiah stared out the windshield, a mix of fear and hope in his expression. "I never wanted any of this," he said, voice trembling. "I just wanted to stand up for what's right." Velma reached over, placing a reassuring hand on his arm. "Sometimes standing up for what's right leads us into battles we never expected, but you're not alone in this." They drove away from the courthouse, the Atlanta skyline gleaming in the distance, each skyscraper a silent witness to the story that was just beginning. Over the next few days, Velma tried to return to her routine. She met with Andrea about the youth mentorship program, counseled a few troubled teens at the nonprofit, and spent the rest of her free time helping Jeremiah catch up on schoolwork. But the tension lingered like a dark cloud overhead, ready to unleash a downpour at any moment. She half expected to see officers Turner and Daniels around every corner, or to be pulled over without cause the next time she drove. Jeremiah even delayed returning to campus. The memory of those officers' threats weighed too heavily on him. On the fourth day after the courthouse incident, Velma's phone rang as she was finishing dinner with Jeremiah. Glancing at the caller ID, she saw Donovan's name and hurried to answer. "Velma," came Donovan's voice, low and measured. "I've spoken with some colleagues in the Atlanta field office. We're interested in meeting you and Jeremiah, perhaps as soon as tomorrow if possible." Velma's heart quickened. "Tomorrow?" "Yes, of course." "Where?" "I'll text you the address. It's a field office near downtown. While the J. Edgar Hoover building in D.C. is the FBI headquarters, we have satellite offices everywhere. We'll keep it low-key. This is just an initial interview to gather more details and see if your experiences align with other complaints we've received." Velma exchanged a look with Jeremiah. He gave a hesitant nod. "We'll be there," she said. The next morning, they arrived at a modest gray building with mirrored windows. A small plaque by the door read Federal Bureau of Investigation, Atlanta Field Office. Inside, after a brief security check, an agent led them to a conference room where Donovan waited, dressed in a crisp navy suit that matched his somber demeanor. He rose to greet them, giving Velma a firm handshake and Jeremiah a reassuring pat on the back. "Thanks for coming in," he said. "Let's sit down." They settled into chairs around a long conference table. Donovan introduced two other individuals, Special Agent Beth Porter and Special Agent Aaron Doss, both from the Civil Rights Division. "Miss Hayes," began Agent Porter, a calm woman with intelligent eyes, "we appreciate your willingness to talk to us. We understand this isn't easy." Velma inclined her head. "I just want to make sure nothing like this happens again. Not to me, not to Jeremiah, not to anyone." Agent Doss nodded. "We've been compiling data on alleged civil rights violations in various police departments. The Atlanta PD has made strides in recent years, but there are still pockets of resistance to reform. Officers Turner and Daniels' names have come up before." Velma's pulse accelerated. "Wait, you mean there are previous complaints?" "That's correct," Donovan confirmed, exchanging a serious look with Porter. "Nothing has stuck so far because the complainants either backed off or lacked concrete evidence." Jeremiah fidgeted in his chair. "Is there any chance they'll come after me?" he asked. "After all, I'm just a student. I don't have much power." Agent Porter pursed her lips. "We'll do what we can to protect you, but it's true that historically, those who speak up sometimes become targets. That's why we're treading carefully." They spent the next hour recounting every detail of the harassment. Jeremiah described being called a thug, and Velma relayed Turner's taunts and insinuations. Agent Doss asked them to describe the officer's physical mannerisms, the environment, even the time of day. By the end, Porter closed her folder. "Thank you. This information could be critical in establishing a pattern. We can't say more at this point, but if we gather enough evidence, the DOJ may launch a formal investigation." Velma took a shaky breath, both relieved and anxious. "I'm glad you're taking it seriously." Donovan gave her a reassuring smile. "We are. Keep documenting everything. If you see them or any other officers harassing you or anyone else, note the date, time, and witnesses." They left the building feeling both hopeful and uneasy. The wheels of justice were turning, but at a snail's pace. Velma knew from her social work experience that change rarely came overnight. Yet, she couldn't ignore the flicker of triumph in her chest. She had turned to family, and the FBI had listened. A single phone call had opened a door that might lead to real accountability. For a while, life returned to a semblance of normalcy. Jeremiah resumed some classes online, nervous about running into the police on his commute. Velma continued her social work, juggling home visits and counseling sessions. But one evening, as Velma was leaving the nonprofit's office, she noticed a black SUV idling across the street. It was nearly 8 p.m., and the street was mostly deserted. Her senses prickled with unease. She walked briskly to her car, glancing over her shoulder. She caught a glimpse of the driver, a man wearing a baseball cap pulled low, his face partially obscured. She quickly slid into her own car, locked the doors, and started the engine. The SUV started moving too, staying several car lengths behind her. Adrenaline flooded her system. She took a few unexpected turns, winding through a residential area. The SUV matched every turn. Velma's hands were clammy on the steering wheel. She remembered Donovan's warning. "Keep your head down. We don't want them retaliating." Was this them? Turner or Daniels, or someone affiliated with them, trying to scare her? Her mind raced. She could call 911, but she wasn't sure how the local police would respond. Instead, she opted to head for a public space, a well-lit gas station next to a busy grocery store. As she pulled in, she noticed a couple of security cameras mounted near the entrance. Sure enough, the SUV didn't follow her in. Instead, it sped past, disappearing down the main road. Velma sat in the driver's seat, heart pounding. She fished out her phone and dialed Donovan. It went to voicemail. She left a message, voice shaky, recounting what had just happened. "Please call me back when you can," she finished. After several minutes, her breathing returned to normal. She thought about the best next move. She could go to the police station, but which officers would be on duty? This could easily be turned around on her. Finally, she decided to drive home. Jeremiah would be waiting, and she needed the safety of familiar walls. Her nerves were rattled, but her resolve was stronger than ever. The next morning, Velma woke to a pounding on her front door. Jeremiah, who had stayed the night, was already in the living room, peering through the peephole. "It's the police," he whispered, voice tight. Velma's stomach dropped. She hurried to the door, heart hammering. Sure enough, through the window, she saw two uniformed officers. They didn't look like Turner or Daniels, but that did little to calm her racing thoughts. She opened the door a crack, chain still on. "Can I help you?" One of the officers, whose name tag read Officer Ramos, inclined his head politely. "Ma'am, We're here to follow up on a report of suspicious activity in the neighborhood. Some neighbors claimed a black SUV was circling the area last night. Did you notice anything unusual? Velma's instinct screamed. Was this genuine concern or a subtle intimidation tactic? She forced herself to remain calm. I saw a black SUV, but it didn't linger around here. She lied, not wanting to betray her fear. Officer Ramos nodded, taking notes. If you see anything else suspicious, please let us know. The other officer, a blonde woman named Officer Klein, gave Jeremiah a quick once-over. Is everything all right in there? She asked, eyes narrowing slightly. Velma bristled. Everything is fine. All right, we're just doing our rounds, Ramos said, stepping away. Have a good day, ma'am. Velma shut the door, heart pounding. Jeremiah stood behind her, looking pale. They were probably just fishing for information, she said quietly. It might be nothing. Jeremiah exhaled, running a hand over his short curls. This is crazy. Indeed, it felt like reality was warping around them. Every shadow seemed dangerous, every knock on the door filled with menace. A few hours later, Donovan finally called back. She told him about the SUV and the officer's visit. It could be unrelated, Donovan said carefully, but given the context, I doubt it. We're ramping up our preliminary investigation. Agent Porter and Agent Das might need more statements soon. Velma sank onto her couch, exhaustion pressing on her. Donovan, is there something big going on? Why do I feel like we're being watched? He hesitated. There have been rumors of certain officers involved in not just harassment, but also covering up incidents of excessive force. If Turner and Daniels are part of that circle, they might be worried about an FBI probe. You and Jeremiah could be a threat to them. Velma's stomach churned. She had never wanted to become entangled in a high-stakes confrontation, but injustice had forced her hand. A week later, Velma received a surprising phone call from Lisa Mendez, Jeremiah's lawyer. I've heard some unsettling chatter from other defense attorneys, Lisa said, her voice tinged with concern. Cases involving officers Turner and Daniels are consistently skewed. Many defendants claim racial profiling and excessive force, but the complaints never gain traction. Velma rubbed her temples. Because people are too scared to push back? Lisa sighed. That's part of it. Another factor is a powerful police union. They have a knack for discrediting complainants and burying inconvenient evidence. Velma swallowed. Her social work background told her that this was no isolated incident. It was a systemic pattern. She thought about the countless times she had tried to help teens navigate the judicial maze, only to see them swallowed whole by an indifferent system. What do we do? She asked. Lisa's answer was blunt. Keep fighting. Keep collecting evidence and testimonies. Stay in touch with the FBI. And be careful. That same day, Agent Porter called, asking Velma to gather any messages, letters, or voicemails that might indicate harassment or intimidation. Jeremiah had received a few anonymous texts calling him a snitch and telling him to keep his mouth shut. They forwarded everything to the FBI. Slowly, they were building a case. But as the case grew stronger, so did Velma's sense of foreboding. She had a recurring nightmare of Turner and Daniels cornering Jeremiah, guns drawn, while she stood powerless. Waking from these dreams left her drenched in sweat and consumed by guilt. Yet, despite the fear, she refused to back down. A month passed. Jeremiah's case was still in limbo, but no new charges had emerged, and Lisa was pushing for a full dismissal. The FBI investigation was in its early stages, with Donovan cautioning her that these cases could take months, even years, to unfold. Then came the day of Jeremiah's final hearing, a date set to either drop the charges or proceed to trial. Velma and Jeremiah arrived at the courthouse early, hoping to avoid any run-ins with Turner and Daniels. They made it through the metal detectors without incident and headed upstairs to meet Lisa outside the assigned courtroom. The hallway bustled with lawyers, plaintiffs, and defendants. Tensions ran high in every corner. As they waited, Lisa joined them, a stack of files in her arms. I have a good feeling about this, she said, offering a reassuring smile. Jeremiah let out a slow breath. Me too, he said, though his voice trembled slightly. A bailiff called out the parties, and they entered the courtroom. Judge Hoffman presided again, her demeanor calm but firm. The prosecutor, Michael Dean, announced that the state, after reviewing the evidence, was dropping all charges against Jeremiah due to lack of sufficient grounds for prosecution. Velma closed her eyes in relief, gratitude welling up. Jeremiah grabbed her hand under the table, squeezing it so tightly it almost hurt. The judge nodded, granting the motion to dismiss. "Mr. Hayes, you're free to go. Let's hope this is the end of it." They walked out of the courtroom, hearts lighter. Jeremiah was officially free of the legal burden that had loomed over him. Lisa clapped him on the back, promising to send the official paperwork once it was finalized. But as they exited the courthouse, their relief turned to dread. Standing at the top of the steps were officers Turner and Daniels, flanked by a few other uniformed policemen. It felt orchestrated, a show of force. Velma's stomach twisted, but she kept walking. Jeremiah followed suit, head held high, determined not to show fear. Turner smirked, stepping forward. "Heard the good news?" he drawled. "Congratulations," Daniels added. "You know the system is broken when criminals walk free." Anger flared inside Velma, but she forced herself to remain calm. "Jeremiah was innocent," she said, her tone measured. Turner snorted. "Innocent is a matter of opinion." Jeremiah clenched his fists, but Velma touched his arm gently. "We're not looking for trouble," she told the officers. "We're just leaving." "Yeah, you do that," Daniels said, stepping closer. "Leave and don't come back." This time, a crowd had begun to gather, sensing the tension. Some pulled out phones to record. Turner noticed the phones, and an ugly sneer tugged at his lips. Just as Velma and Jeremiah tried to walk past, Turner shoved Jeremiah in the shoulder, sending him stumbling. Murmurs of shock rippled through the onlookers. Velma gasped, stepping protectively between them. "Hey," Jeremiah protested, regaining his balance. "Oh, you got a problem?" Turner barked. His voice echoed off the courthouse steps. In an instant, Velma's fear vanished, replaced by a righteous fury. She pointed at Turner, her voice shaking with anger. "Assaulting a citizen? On courthouse property? In front of witnesses and cameras? You're out of your mind." Turner's cheeks reddened, but he didn't back down. Instead, he scoffed, scanning the crowd. "You got no proof." But the phone cameras said otherwise. People were capturing everything. Daniels tried to step in, but a voice cut through the chaos. "Police brutality. I've got it on video." The tension escalated, a chorus of voices rising in condemnation. Velma could barely hear over the noise, but she noticed Turner and Daniels exchanging worried glances. A siren wailed in the distance, and a police cruiser pulled up to the curb. For a split second, Velma's heart sank, fearing reinforcements for Turner and Daniels. But then she saw a pair of suits, FBI agents emerging from a black sedan behind the cruiser. Agent Donovan Reed and Agent Aaron Doss strode forward with purposeful urgency. Donovan locked eyes with Velma, nodding subtly. "Officers Turner, Daniels," Agent Doss called out, flashing his badge. "We'd like a word." The crowd erupted in hushed murmurs. Turner's face paled, and Daniels' bravado faltered. Their fellow officers stepped back, uncertain. Jeremiah's eyes were wide with astonishment. Velma placed a hand on his back. She realized with a surge of gratitude that the cavalry had arrived, federal agents who had the authority to investigate these officers. She wasn't entirely sure how the rest of this confrontation would play out, but one thing was clear. Turner and Daniels' reign of intimidation was about to face the harsh light of scrutiny. In the minutes that followed, a tense standoff ensued on the courthouse steps. Agent Reed and Agent Doss kept their tones even and professional, but the weight of their authority was unmistakable. They informed Turner and Daniels that they were under federal investigation for potential civil rights violations. "You can't do this," Turner snapped, his voice losing much of its swagger. "We haven't done anything." "Then you have nothing to worry about," Agent Doss replied calmly. "But we've received multiple complaints of racial harassment and excessive force." The other officers who had accompanied Turner and Daniels quietly slipped away, not wanting to be implicated. Meanwhile, curious onlookers leaned forward, filming or whispering among themselves. Velma and Jeremiah stood a few steps back, hearts still pounding. Donovan approached them, lowering his voice. "Are you both okay?" Velma managed to nod. "Yes. Thank you for getting here so fast." Donovan gave a tight smile. "We had an eye on the situation. We were ready to intervene if anything happened." Agent Doss continued talking to Turner and Daniels, advising them of their rights, while also making it clear that any attempt to interfere with witnesses would be met with swift consequences. The implication was clear. Turner and Daniels were no longer acting with impunity. Velma almost felt pity for them, almost. Then she remembered the fear they had inflicted, the intimidation, the assault. No, they deserved whatever consequences came their way. After a heated exchange, Turner and Daniels were led to a nearby police cruiser. "It's just for questioning," Donovan whispered to Velma and Jeremiah. "We're not placing them under arrest right this second, but we need to bring them in for a formal interview." The wave of relief that washed over Velma was so intense that she felt tears brimming in her eyes. Jeremiah exhaled a shaky laugh, hugging his aunt. "We did it," he murmured. A local news crew, attracted by the commotion, approached Velma for a statement. At first, she hesitated, but Jeremiah nodded encouragingly. "People need to know," he whispered. She stepped forward, microphone in her face, camera rolling. She spoke of Jeremiah's wrongful arrest, of the harassment outside the courthouse, of the phone call to the FBI that set this in motion. She talked about the importance of standing up against racism, even when it was terrifying. Her words reverberated across the courthouse steps, capturing the attention of passers-by and viewers at home. In that moment, Velma realized this wasn't just about her or Jeremiah. This was about every black man and woman who had ever felt the weight of prejudice, who had lost faith in a system that so often failed them. As she concluded her brief statement, Donovan gave her a supportive nod. "We'll handle it from here," he whispered, then walked toward the cruiser carrying Turner and Daniels, where Agent Doss was already briefing local PD officers on the situation. Velma stood on the steps, Jeremiah's arm around her shoulders, breathing in the cool air of late afternoon. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, she felt a spark of hope that real change was possible. News of the FBI's intervention spread through the city like wildfire, igniting a mixture of hope and unease in neighborhoods long accustomed to seeing justice slip through the cracks. After decades of whispers about systemic corruption within certain corners of the Atlanta Police Department, the mere possibility of accountability sent shockwaves through the local community. Some people cheered, convinced this was the beginning of a new era. Others, wary of broken promises, worried that it would all end in yet another cover-up. Against this backdrop, officers Turner and Daniels found themselves under a scrutiny they had never known. Public outcry intensified when local media outlets, such as the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, ran articles detailing the FBI's civil rights investigation into multiple allegations against the two men. The stories painted Turner and Daniels as repeat offenders, citing internal affairs documents that had been quietly shelved and witness statements that had gone ignored. There were whispered rumors of an old guard within the department that protected officers like them, enabling a culture of impunity. For Velma Hayes and her nephew Jeremiah, each new day brought a conflicting blend of vindication and anxiety. Their ordeal had sparked this larger inquiry, and they were keenly aware that the spotlight shone directly on them. While they drew strength from the community's support, especially from other families who reached out to share similar stories of harassment, they also knew that fighting against a system with deep, tangled roots could be perilous. A single phone call to the FBI had lit a fuse. Now they were watching it burn toward a powder keg of evidence. The turning point arrived one gray morning when Velma switched on the television to see live footage of Turner and Daniels being escorted into the federal courthouse on Spring Street. Camera flashes erupted like fireworks around them. Both officers kept their heads down, their usual sneers replaced by tight, anxious grimaces. They wore suits instead of uniforms, as if trying to distance themselves from the very badges that had once given them power. The broadcast cut to a statement from FBI Special Agent Aaron Doss, flanked by Agent Donovan Reed. "These allegations indicate a clear pattern of civil rights violations," Doss told the cameras. "We are working in tandem with the Department of Justice to ensure a thorough investigation and fair proceedings." Velma turned up the volume, absorbing every word. While part of her rejoiced at seeing Turner and Daniels humbled on live television, another part of her felt strangely numb, fearful that this victory might still slip away. She thought of all the times she'd seen justice teased but never fulfilled, especially for black communities that had grown used to systemic failure. Inside the courthouse, a labyrinth of red tape awaited Turner and Daniels. Their defense attorneys, handpicked by the police union, tried to spin the narrative that the two men were misunderstood public servants thrust into a political circus. To bolster that view, they presented stacks of commendations, most for mundane policing tasks, and references from high-ranking allies claiming Turner and Daniels were model officers. But behind closed doors, prosecutors, local civil rights organizations, and FBI investigators had already accumulated a staggering body of evidence. Body-worn camera footage, missing and found. In a stroke of irony, some of Turner and Daniels' body cam videos had mysteriously disappeared from official records, only to resurface on an unencrypted backup server that the two men either didn't know about or had overlooked. The recovered clips showed them sneering at suspects, making racial slurs under their breath, and even discussing ways to circumvent departmental reviews. One particularly damning clip featured Turner muttering, "He's just another punk kid. Nobody will believe him if we say he was resisting." Internal complaints, buried files. A whistleblower from the APD's Internal Affairs Division leaked evidence that a half-dozen complaints against Turner and Daniels had been summarily dismissed. Signed statements from complainants described eerily similar patterns of harassment, intimidation, and racially charged language, accounts that all ended with Turner or Daniels claiming resisting arrest or threatening behavior. Supervisors loyal to them had apparently looked the other way, stamping unsubstantiated on each report. Community testimonies, echoes of pain. Residents from Vine City, Pittsburgh, Summerhill, and other historically black neighborhoods bravely came forward, sharing experiences of being stopped, frisked, and sometimes assaulted for reasons that never made sense. Teenagers recounted being told they fit a description for crimes that turned out never to have occurred. An elderly woman tearfully described how Turner had pulled her son out of their car at gunpoint while Daniels taunted, "We know you people are always hiding something." All of it added up to a staggering indictment of Turner and Daniels' careers, a toxic brew of racism, bullying, and outright abuses of power. Meanwhile, the local police union scrambled to manage the fallout. On one hand, they had to defend two officers whose guilt seemed increasingly obvious. On the other, the union risked a public relations nightmare if they stonewalled an ongoing federal probe. Rumors circulated that some union officials wanted to cut Turner and Daniels loose to protect the larger institution. When Turner and Daniels entered the courtroom for their preliminary hearing, they walked past a row of spectators that included not just reporters and activists, but also some of their alleged victims. A hush fell over the gallery. The usual courthouse chatter faded, replaced by low murmurs of anticipation. Judge Helen DuBois, a well-respected figure who had a reputation for fairness, presided over the hearing. Outside in the corridor, Velma and Jeremiah waited with Lisa Mendez, Jeremiah's lawyer, whose pro bono efforts had expanded to represent another young man victimized by Turner and Daniels. They'd been asked to be on standby in case their testimonies were needed that day. Through the thick wooden doors, they could occasionally hear raised voices, first from the prosecution outlining the severity of charges, and then from the defense attempting to undermine the FBI's case as an overreach of federal power. "They're really reaching, aren't they?" Lisa whispered, shaking her head. "I've seen a lot of attempts to dodge accountability, but this is brazen." Velma nodded, fiddling with her phone. The sense of unease pressed down on her, mixing with a fierce pride. This was the system working, or at least trying to work as it should. She felt Jeremiah's hand on her shoulder, steadying her. At one point, Turner's attorney argued for the case to be dismissed on procedural grounds, claiming the FBI had violated the officer's Fourth Amendment rights during the evidence-gathering process. The prosecutor, armed with court-approved warrants and a paper trail of legally obtained information, systematically dismantled the argument piece by meticulous piece. Finally, Judge DuBois spoke in a tone that resonated through the hallway, her voice carrying weight and clarity. "Officer Turner, Officer Daniels," she said, "the severity and volume of these allegations is extraordinary. Given the evidence presented, this court cannot in good conscience dismiss the charges. You will both stand trial." In that pivotal moment, a wave of muted applause and sighs of relief washed through the public seating area. For Velma and Jeremiah, the words, "You will both stand trial," reverberated like the sweetest music. Shortly after, Turner and Daniels exited the courtroom, flanked by their attorneys. Cameras clicked, reporters shouted questions, and bystanders jeered. Gone were the arrogant leer and casual intimidation. Their faces were drawn, their eyes darting nervously behind sunglasses as if they couldn't bear to look at the faces of those they had once victimized. For the first time, they were forced to play by the rules of a system they'd abused for far too long. Watching the broadcast that evening, Velma felt an odd mixture of triumph and sadness. Triumph because justice was taking a firm step forward. Sadness because she knew it had taken far too many broken lives and too many silent voices before the system finally responded. She thought of the countless others who never got a hearing, whose cries for help went unanswered, and whose stories would never make the evening news. Yet, she also felt something new blossoming in her chest: hope. Even if Turner and Daniels' eventual sentences weren't as long as their victims believed they deserved, even if they negotiated plea deals to reduce time, this public reckoning would forever stain their reputations. They would never again terrorize innocent people under the authority of a badge. And perhaps, just perhaps, the department that once shielded them would reevaluate its practices, opening the door for genuine reforms that could save lives in the future. That night, Jeremiah settled onto the couch beside Velma as they debriefed the day's events. "It's almost surreal," he confessed, glancing over at the TV where local news replayed footage of Turner and Daniels in handcuffs. "A few months ago, I thought my life was over. Now I'm watching them face the consequences." Velma wrapped an arm around him, her eyes brimming with tears she refused to let fall. "It's what should happen," she said quietly, "and it never would have if we hadn't stood up and made that call. This isn't just for us. It's for everyone who's ever been afraid to speak out." She recalled every sleepless night, every anonymous threat, and every moment of second-guessing herself. It had all led to this: the sight of two crooked cops facing federal charges in a case that was impossible to bury. In the end, that was the greatest sign of change. And so, as the courthouse lights dimmed and the city skyline glowed in the distance, the deeper meaning of hard karma took shape. Turner and Daniels had once ruled with intimidation, banking on a broken system to keep them safe. Now they were the ones blinking under harsh fluorescent lights and the unyielding gaze of the law. They had sowed fear. They would now reap the consequences in the most public way possible. That realization echoed in Velma's mind as she drifted off to sleep. She knew the path ahead still held challenges: court dates, trials, appeals, and the emotional toll of reliving trauma. But in the calm before the next wave of legal battles, she found solace in one powerful truth: sometimes, even in a flawed system, justice can strike like lightning when you dare to summon it. With the storm finally passing, Velma sat on her porch, sipping sweet tea as the summer sun dipped below the horizon. Jeremiah was inside, finishing an essay for his creative writing course. She felt lighter than she had in months. She was under no illusion that racism and policing had been magically solved, but at least in this corner of Atlanta, two harmful officers had been held accountable. Perhaps it would encourage others to speak out, to refuse silence in the face of wrongdoing. Her phone rang. Donovan again. She smiled as she answered, grateful for the cousin who had stepped in when she needed him most. "Velma," Donovan said, an easy warmth in his voice. "Just calling to check on you." "I'm doing okay," she replied, watching a firefly flicker in the yard. "How are things on your end?" "We're compiling our final report. Looks like Turner and Daniels will both serve time, though not as much as they deserve, in my opinion. But it sends a message." Velma nodded, her throat tight with emotion. "Thank you, Donovan. You helped change everything." He chuckled softly. "Don't give me too much credit. You're the one who decided enough was enough." That phone call was just the beginning. They chatted a bit more, discussing family plans for the holidays. After they hung up, Velma sat quietly, reflecting on the upheaval of the last few months. Despite the nightmares, the threats, and the fear, she felt stronger. A single mother, a social worker, a woman who believed in the power of truth, she had fought an unjust system and come out with her dignity intact. More importantly, Jeremiah had seen firsthand that it was possible to stand up for what was right, even when it felt like the whole world was against you. Inside, Jeremiah called out, "Aunt Velma, you got a minute? I want you to read something I wrote." She rose, carrying her sweet tea into the house. "Sure thing, baby," she replied, and as she walked into the living room, a gentle smile curved her lips. This was what it was all about: a future where young men like Jeremiah could dream, create, and live without fear, a future perhaps a little brighter than before. Thank you for joining us on this emotional roller coaster of courage, confrontation, and hard-earned justice. From the courthouse steps where Officer Turner and Officer Daniels first harassed Velma and Jeremiah, to the powerful moment when the FBI arrived and exposed their wrongdoing, this story shows us that one voice can spark a massive change. If you found yourself rooting for Velma and Jeremiah, or if you were on the edge of your seat when karma came for those crooked cops. Then take a moment to let us know your thoughts. Here's our call to action. If this story inspired you, please like this video, share it with your friends, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss another gripping tale. By spreading stories of justice and resilience, we encourage more people to stand up against injustice. Together, we can make a difference.